One. Okay, so we'll just give it a couple of minutes to get people coming in here. And thanks for bearing with me on this, Steve.
All right. I was getting ready to set my broadcast software in my office room and just Zoom you and plug it in, but as long as this works, it works, right?
Hey, I'm not sure why it's going so well this morning, but I'm not going to question it. Let's do it. Okay, so far, I just want to give it a couple of minutes. There we go. Okay. Steve, can you see the people commenting? Good morning, Keith. Good morning, Nicole.
No, I don't see anything. Hold on. Lara Joseph, can you hear me? That's all it says.
Oh. Okay. Yeah, no, you're looking at
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
My camera switched to my back camera, which is in a stand. How do we fix that? Oh, hold on.
There you go. Okay. Yeah, and if for any reason during this, Steve, there's a refresh button. I'm not used to using Google Chrome. So do you know where the refresh button is?
I am on my cell phone, actually, with a Bluetooth keyboard. So looks like I have 15 viewers right now.
20.
20 now?
Yep. So hey guys, welcome to Coffee with the Critters. Good morning, Sandy. Good morning, Beth, Eva, Felicia, Lindsay. This is a new
I guess I don't have to type it, huh? I guess I could just say it.
Let me just click this button because I think it's going to, let's see. There we go. There's Steve. There's me. So, hey, everybody, I'm just going to go ahead and get started. Steve, cannot see the comments?
I see you saying, can you hear me?
Okay.
And that's it. Let me open it up on my tablet here. I'll get the comments from my tablet instead.
Okay. Here we go.
I am loaded with technology this morning. I got all kinds of stuff up here.
Well, it's not jinx anything since it's going so well.
Well, I got the tablet's on a separate Wi-Fi anyway right now, so I'm making sure we don't get any conflict with that. All right. Join me. Nancy likes a photo. I got that.
Okay. Yep. Everybody's coming in and saying good morning. So, and what I can do is watch this. So Joe Stevens said hi. Oh, let me hit. Okay. I can put it up like this.
Good morning, Len. Good morning, Joe. I see that.
Okay. That's what you need to look for. So let's go ahead and get started. I'll introduce myself. Thanks guys for bearing with us. This is a new platform for me. Well, not really, but, Steve and I sat here for quite a while yesterday trying to make this work. So I want to say thank you so much, Steve, for bearing with me.
It was not too bad. It was fun.
Yeah. So for those that don't know, my name is Lara Joseph. I'm the owner of the Animal Behavior Center. Welcome to Coffee with the Critters. We do this live stream every Sunday morning from right here. We've been doing this for over 2 years now. And the Animal Behavior Center is an international educational center where we teach people via our live streams all over the world how to work with animals using approaches in positive reinforcement and applied behavior analysis. And who I have with me this morning is Steve Johnson. So I want to introduce him. I'll tell you a little bit what I know about him, and then Steve, feel free to jump in and expand your background. So I know I've interacted with you a few times, Steve, via our live stream Coffee with the Critters over the past 2 years. That's when I first found out about you, and you had told me that you had worked at an avian vet clinic. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
And then, so I started paying attention because I could tell you knew what you were talking about when you would comment. I could tell you knew what you were talking about in working with applied behavior analysis So that's why I started paying closer attention to you on my live streams. And then I think we actually met last year at AFA. What was a year ago? Yeah, it was a year ago this weekend, because like we were just talking before this live stream started, AFA is happening right now somewhere in Texas.
Tucson.
Tucson. Okay. Oh, Arizona. Okay. I was close.
Somewhere down there, somewhere down south.
So, yeah, last year, this was the first time I met you face-to-face was at AFA, the American Federation of Aviculture, their annual convention. And we actually spent a lot of time hanging out, talking behavior.
Yes.
Yeah.
Kindred spirits.
Yes, which was fascinating. So it was just like, it was like every day I was like, if he's going to be in here, he's going to be sitting somewhere right around here. And we just sit there and chit, 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 chit.
Yeah, we know where to find each other.
So that was a lot of fun. And then ever since then, I know we messaged back and forth about some different behavior geek talk interests that we have. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Steve. I'm sure there's a lot about you in your work of behavior, how you got involved. I just find you very fun and fascinating to talk to because you know what you're talking about.
Well, I got into this field with animals as a actual field about 7 years ago. I had spent most of my life in sales and marketing type stuff, as well as when I was younger, a bunch of other business ventures. And I got sick of it. I got sick of the marketing, got sick of the sales. It's not a great field to be in if market's down. And I, at the time, had 4 parrots, budgies and cockatiels. And I said, you know what? I have an opportunity here to do something different that I might actually enjoy. And I left my job I was internet sales at a car dealership at the time, and went to vet tech school. And I went straight through that, and more so to help my birds, learn more about my birds. And I always have a thirst for knowledge, learning what I want to do.
That's a pretty big step for you to jump into vet tech school because you wanted to increase the knowledge about your birds. That's pretty cool.
It was a strange journey. I mean, the class, I went to what was considered the best tech school in the area at the time. And, our class, I go to 16-month school, and there's about 35 students, 3 guys, and the rest girls. There was myself. I was 45 at the time, and another guy who was a little bit older than me. And, about 35 females ages 18 to 40 or 50. So it was a very interesting thing. We got along really well with everybody there. And yeah, it was, you learn a lot about not so much birds, but it was nothing what I expected. I expected a field of, we're going to, play with the animals and help the animals and clean up poop and maybe help the vet once in a while. And when I actually got into the school, I was like, this is really in-depth. We started to sell and work on every major system throughout. But, even in all that, there was no behavior talk, but it was something new for me.
That's interesting. I'm just going to jot some notes I want to talk about. Go ahead.
Sure. And so I did my 16 months, and at the end, there's 8 weeks of in-clinic before you get to graduate. And there's only 1 or 2 clinics in town here that actually see birds. And luckily, I was able to talk my vet, Dave Kirsting at Bird Medicine and Surgery, into taking me on as extern with a caveat that if he was happy that I would be hired. And about 2 weeks in, he hired me, my 8 weeks.
Now, is this in St. Louis?
This is in St. Louis, yes.
Which is where you're at right now?
Where I'm at right now, yes. Actually, I'm in Creve Coeur, but it's considered St. Louis proper. And I stayed there for about 5 years. And one of the things that struck me the most is people having trouble with their birds and behavior. And back then I had studied, or I won't say studied, I had read a bunch of books by behavior and training people that were from quite a while ago, and it's nothing that I recommend a lot now. But it got me into that mindset of we got to do better for our birds behavior-wise, because a lot of the problem is usually with us not understanding what they are expecting.
Yeah. Now, the clinic that you worked in, was it just avians? Was it avian and exotic? Was it?
Well, as far as avian only clinics, there's not a ton of those in the States. And there's several reasons for that. Some of it's demographics. The clinic I worked at here was, if you go by client or patient wise, about 80% birds.
Okay.
If you go by revenue wise, it was about 55 to 60% birds. So it's very difficult to keep a clinic open and cover overhead with a bird-only clientele, except in very few places in the country.
Yeah, kind of similar to the reason I called it the Animal Behavior Center instead of the Avian Behavior Center.
Yeah, when I left clinics and started my LLC, I started out and I took name suggestions from a couple of my clients at the clinic, and one lady come up with all pets behavior, and she said you'll be close to first in the phone book because you have an A, and if somebody needs help they can send out an APB for you. And I liked it. I gave her a discount at the clinic, I believe, or at least tried to talk to the owner into giving her that. And so I'll go all parrots behavior, all pets behavior, acceptable pet behavior. I use different names depending on the situation I'm in, and then I have just it all under a blanket LLC. But where were we at? Back up the question. I'm not quite awake yet.
Well, I was asking you about the clinic that you worked in. But you started talking, Steve, about how when you started working at that clinic, you started seeing a lot of behavior issues.
Yeah, I mean, you see it as well. I mean, not just with parrots, but dogs and cats too. The core problem I see with people having behavior problems with their birds is they don't understand what the birds are trying to tell them. And we know that the birds don't talk, but they talk.
Yeah, with the body.
And then if you don't know what the bird's saying, then you're not going to ask why the bird's saying it. And that's the core of most of the problems is the why. And if you can't figure that out, then you're stuck.
Yeah, and did you happen to see? I've only done this live stream side by side once before, and it was with Patricia Anderson.
I think that's all part of that, yes.
Okay, and that's the one we talked on anthropomorphism, putting characteristics on animals. And I'm just bringing that up because it's tying in exactly what you're saying.
Well, the bird's aggressive, or the bird's jealous, or tying human emotions to a behavior that probably has absolutely nothing to do with what we think it has to do with.
Yeah. And that's across the board with all types of animals.
Yes. I see it with dogs a lot too.
I know. And it's, do I anthropomorphize? Yeah.
Absolutely. I do too.
Get points across, and I sit there and talk of sweet baby Rico, even
sweet Suki.
Yeah. But there's a time when the anthropomorphism gets you in trouble. Puts you, depending on the animals you're working with, can put you in a pretty dangerous situation.
Yeah. There's definitely times, even with parrots where, you can be in danger if you misunderstand what's going on, or you assign a label to it that's not really what's going on. Changing or mistaking dominance for fear is one. The bird, the dog's dominant. Well, no, the dog's probably scared to death.
Yeah.
And you give it the space and it's going to be fine. But, if you try to dominate it back, then you can be in trouble.
Sure. And most people I mean, not most people, a lot of people do. Like I see this not so much in the bird world, well, maybe so, but I see it in the dog world and definitely in the pig world. And you got to show the animal who's boss. And
Yeah.
what the heck
Um,
does that mean? And I would highly suggest not doing it.
I I haven't been fortunate enough to see a ton of pigs here in St. Louis. Maybe 3 or 4 pigs, and up in New York when I was with Lori Hess up there for a short period of time, a lot more pigs. Up there, we only saw exotics. There's no dogs or cats in the clinic at all.
And that was in Long Island, right? Is that in
Bedford Hills, so still Westchester County. And I mean, that's all we did there was exotics, no dogs, no cats. Strangely enough, she is a diplomated avian vet, but we saw so many other species as well, a lot more than I expected to see when I was up there. A ton of reptiles. Reptiles are really fun for behavior. For those who don't know, they can be trained very well too, and with the right patience and the right reinforcers.
Sure, sure. I don't work with a lot of reptiles, but I know one I really would love the opportunity to train is a bearded dragon.
Yes, beardies are a ton of fun, and they have a lot of people have this belief that reptiles don't have personality, and that is so far from the truth.
Yeah.
Beardies, especially, I mean, among others, but they have so much personality once you let them open it. It's amazing.
Yeah, yeah. So okay. What other types of work have you done?
Meaning before or after, during?
After your school, so you went from, I'm just trying to get more of an understanding of what, bless you. After school, then you stayed in St. Louis for 5 years. Then did you move to New York?
So yeah, I was here for roughly 5 years. I ran into Dr. Hess at the AAV conference, and she had expressed that she needed a tech, and I had no desire to go anywhere else, but she kind of talked me into it. So I packed up and moved up there. I was there for 6 months, and my wife's employment situation changed back here in St. Louis, which made it better for us to come back here. And she was here the whole time. She was going to follow me up after I bought a house up there. But so the 6 months there, I learned a lot more with the non-avian exotics. And then I've been back here. I've been working my LLC a little bit. I've taken a few clients. I do some volunteer work with World Bird Sanctuary when I'm able, which hasn't been much lately. And then, in that period of time while I was up there, I got certified with the International Avian Trainer Certification Board. So I have a CPBTKA now. It's a nice little plaque on my wall in the office there.
Yeah. So you do take on clients?
I do take on clients, yes. I haven't taken on that many just due to other business ventures I'm working on now, but I'm always open to help. I administrate and moderate a couple boards on Facebook here, Parrots, Questions and Answers, and Bird Addicts. And while I don't do a ton of behavior speak on there just because it's better to do one-on-one if you're doing consultation. So many things can be misconstrued when you're talking or typing that may not be the intent of what you say. As you know, what I say is not always what you hear.
Right, exactly. Your perception.
Yes. Perception and inference and implications are all different depending on which side of the conversation you're on.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, with some, now do you just take on birds?
Actually, my certification is for birds, but as you know, behavior is behavior. Once you get down to the science, then if you can get the science down first and then get the ethology in there of the species, because each species has its own ethological implications as well. And I would say I don't read many animals as well as I read birds. But yes, I will take on any other clients as well.
Okay, good to know. One thing, just coming to mind listening to you talk, I was thinking about this yesterday. A lot of times when people want to approach with a behavior issue, and I know they may not understand this right in the beginning, but it's like, I don't need to know their whole history.
Right.
And that's where I think there's a big disconnect between people that are doing behavior consults or what have you, and the common public that is interested in contacting you about health. Is people feel the need to come, and I understand where they're coming from. They feel like this animal has this gargantuous history and you need to know what has happened over the past 3 decades.
Yeah.
What are your, and I feel like sometimes when I'm saying, I try to tell people, I really don't need to hear all of that. Just tell me I don't even, sometimes, and I do like to approach it like this, Steve, because it gets the other person thinking outside the box. I'm like, I don't even need to know what the animal or species is you're talking about. Just give me
Give me the current antecedents. What's the start with the most recent and work your way back, and somewhere there we'll find a reason, as long as you know what the animal gets out of what it's doing, right?
Right.
If you know a very famous trainer who does a workshop, the motto is "What's in it for me?" Steve Martin at Natural Encounters says when you go and do his workshop, everything he gives you, all the cups, all the bags, what's in it for me? Yeah. And that's basically what it is. If you find out what's in it for dogs, cats, birds, humans, you find that reinforcer, and you can change whatever you need to change. For me, the first thing I will ask somebody is, when's the last time you've been to the vet?
Sure. Absolutely.
And I won't take on a client that doesn't have a current vet history. I mean, within the last, if it's a possible medical issue, I'll recommend the vet first. But if it's something that may be environmental, I'll as long as you're current within the last 12 months, I like to know that you have a vet because a lot of behavior is medical. And a lot of feather picking might start behavioral, then start medical, then become behavioral after that,
or vice versa.
Yeah, or vice versa.
Yeah. Well, you just said something that made me about going to the vet. Sometimes, and that's one of the ways how I will determine whether I'll take on a client or not. Because like you and I were talking yesterday, it can be really frustrating when the person's just, I want this fixed now. That is not a client I'm going to take on.
I was thinking about that last night. I'm like, what are we going to talk about? And the I want this fixed now stuck with me because you and I both, a lot of people we associate with prefer a positive reinforcement approach to behavior. But what happens if you need something done now and you don't have the time to train it? How far do you take it? Will you use a towel and move an animal, shift an animal with a towel if you have to do it right now? Or, best, we would always want, the behavior to be trained on cue to move, to shift, to do whatever. But I noticed even with my own birds, sometimes I might use negative reinforcement in the immediate.
Sure.
But yeah, you're right. The clients, a lot of behavior takes time. A couple of years ago, I was at the AAV conference, and I believe it was Scott Eccles and Brian Spear were talking about feather destructive behavior. And according to their information, a feather destructive bird will take, on average, twice as long to resolve as it's been going on. So if you have a bird that has acute feather destruction, and you can find out why. Even if you can find out why, if it's been going on a month, chances are it's going to take 2 months or more to resolve. Okay. Even if you can find out why. A couple of my birds, I've taken in quite a few birds over the years, and one of my Goffins had been living at the clinic I worked at for 6 years and had been feather destructive the entire time. And tried everything from behavior modification, medicinal, haloperidol, a couple of the other ones, and it never resolved. And right now she's probably as feathered as she has been in the past 10 years, but she's still feather destructive.
Yeah. I have a couple, because sometimes, let me write this down because I need to stay on track. Like we were talking about, the vet check is one of the first things we'll suggest. And I'll tell people, because you can sit here and spend a lot of time and money with me, but if this is a medical issue, we may not even touch
right.
So,
right. And that's the antecedent, right? That's an antecedent that if you don't go to the vet, you're not going to know, unless it's quite obvious. And
yeah. And in the consultation papers that I send out, right at the top is who's the vet. Yeah.
Yeah. You guys, there's some really good vets near you guys, if I have my geography correct. A couple of friends of mine. You're how far from Cincinnati?
About 3.5 hours.
Oh, maybe not close as I thought you were. I don't know mine.
Like our vet here is Dr. Tim Reichert. He is the
okay. Yes,
he's phenomenal. He's the former Toledo Zoo vet and a former San Diego Zoo vet.
Yeah.
So he comes in and just sees everybody.
Yeah.
I love him. I adore him because he's very unintrusive. I know we've got Dr. Jamie Lindstrom, Dr. Riggs. I know Dr. Dalhousen, Dr. O.
Dr. Bob is a really great guy. I love him. He's awesome.
Yeah.
Every time I go to make it to AAV, I try to get dinner with him, or at least spend an hour at his booth talking. He's a phenomenal individual. Dr. Dalhousen is.
Yeah, so it's nice right here in the state of Ohio. I have a vet like Dr. Tim Reichert comes here. Yeah. Anytime I have a problem, he's here.
It's one thing about vets is there's a big stigma. I won't say stigma. A big push on a lot of the message boards and social media that you have to have an avian vet. And the vet I work for here is not diplomated avian vet. He's been in practice for 30 years, 80% vet, and he's at AAV every time. He was at, anybody that knows Don Harris posted a picture of one of his talks at AAV, and Dave Kirsten, who's my vet here, front row. It's not always important to have that diplomat's certification if you have the experience, and a lot of the diplomated vets will tell you the same, because it's not an easy task to get those certifications, but it's important to have the experience even if you're diplomated.
Yes,
because you can get that without tons of experience too.
Yeah. Yeah, like Dr. Reichert is the one that I know. I mentioned this last night. Friday was like, I can't stand the anniversaries of bad things. Like you, I know it only takes one time for a positive Punisher to happen, and that's all it takes. So I could not get August 4th out of my mind. But Friday was the 3-year anniversary of Rico's accident, and it was Dr. Reichert. It
was funny you mentioned the positive punishment. If it's strong enough, it only takes one time.
Yeah.
And it's shown a lot. I believe the best example of that's taste aversion.
Go into depth.
Well, taste aversion has been brought up several times in the conferences I've talked about as good examples of positive punishment, because you taste something bad and you're not tasting that again for a long time. and there's a question here. negative reinforcement as in wanted behavior encouraged by removing something not wanted. Yes, that would be negative reinforcement. So negative reinforcement is, yes, so if you have a bird and you want the bird to move, and we'll use the birds because this is what I see, especially in vet clinics a lot, is if you want the bird to shift from one place to another, if you hold a towel towards the bird's going to move opposite the towel. And when the bird gets where you want, the towel goes away. And that would be an example of negative reinforcement because the towel is an adversive stimulus.
Another way to remember negative reinforcement is it's escape avoidance behavior. You get the animal to do what you want it to do to escape, avoid a consequence. And there's downfalls to it because it's usually associated with you. And if you do it once in a while, there's your intermittent schedule reinforcement, which creates the label unpredictable.
Yeah.
So, for example, I did this the other day, and I recognized I did it, and I was like, I don't want to keep doing that. I had cello on my head, and I tried to go get him on the stand, and he was popping off. So I went like this. That's negative reinforcement. The behavior, so what is the behavior I wanted? I wanted him hopped off. He did to escape, avoid being knocked off balance.
Right.
And it's reinforcement if the future behavior continues to maintain or increase. If I realize I'm using a negative reinforcer, I try to identify it immediately and see if there's an alternate approach. And
we make that note. Yeah.
Yep. If I'm using negative reinforcement, I will make sure that I'm always pairing it with positive reinforcement with the intention of slowly fading out the negative reinforcer.
Yes, yeah.
So I'm just saying that because sometimes an area where I will use negative reinforcement and positive reinforcement together are usually when I'm working with a wildlife ambassador.
Yes. Hands off is another, or protected content or contacts would be another time where you might use that. I agree. But even if you want to fade that out as fast as possible, right? Absolutely. And like you said, you want to make a note of what I had to use negative reinforcement for, and then come back later and work on a positive reinforcement to get that same behavior.
Yeah.
Because
I was going to say, because name some, go ahead, Steve.
Because one behavior might have more than one reinforcer. And just because it's a behavior that gets reinforced negatively doesn't mean it's one that can't be reinforced positively, or both. And you want to move towards that positive to build that relationship, because every time you use a negative, animals remember that.
Yeah.
It's like, that wasn't fun for me, so let's not do that.
Right. And if you're trying to build a relationship with that animal, it can build a lot quicker.
Yes, yeah. I noticed the last bird I took in was another Goffin, and he is a Goffin. He's very spastic. He does his thing when he wants to do it, and the owners had trained him to do a ring stack behavior as the only behavior they actually as a behavior train as a trick, and I immediately started working with that when I got him, and I found that the Goffins are much like the Corvids.
Really?
If you're not fast enough, you're losing it.
Fast.
He moves a lot faster than I do still, and I try. And that was one of the things I learned at the NEI workshop was we may think that we're going too fast for an animal, and most of the time we're going too slow. Yeah. They work faster than we do many, many times. I was working with the McCall up there, and the McCall I worked with is actually in one of the Disney shows, the D-word shows now. And I was training him to do a circle on the stand, and then I eventually, when you go to this workshop, you learn basic ABC, animal applied behavior analysis with Susan Friedman and Steve Martin, and so you learn the basics of the science, and then you get your animal you train, and you pick a behavior. And my behavior was voluntary anesthesia. So one of the workshop guys there fashioned me an anesthesia mask, and I'm training the bird to stick his head in and hold it. So you work on your with any training, and a lot of people don't know this, you need to work on a plan, and you need to have that plan out. So you step one is get the bird to look at it. Step two is get the bird to move towards it. Step three is to get the bird to touch it. Step four is get the bird to put his head in. Step five is get the bird to hold his head in, and then you blow in so there's a volume of air going in, and get the bird to hold it in. So every plan. I'm being visited by chipmunks.
Oh, I was like, it kind of looks like I'm like Jurassic Park is happening behind you.
I get quite the animal menage here. That's a chipmunk going for my bird food, it looks like.
And Barbara, I'll answer your question in a minute. I don't want you thinking I didn't see it. Good question. Good question. Where are we? Oh, yeah. So plan. So I know I'm talking all over the place here. I'm not keeping a straight train of thought. But when we're working on changing behavior, it's always good to have a written plan. And the good thing about written plans is if you work your plan and it doesn't work, then you know where you went wrong and you can go back and change that step. Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of times I'll tell people, there's a couple things I tell people. Know what you're training before you walk in, because as soon as, pending like your proximity to that animal, that's communication. If that animal has a history of training at that proximity and you walk up to it and you decide to turn and talk to somebody standing next to you, you could be training so many things because that animal's sitting there looking at you. This is a form, this is how we have our conversations through this communication. And that's why when I'm training, one of my biggest pet peeves is for somebody to start talking to me. Yes. If I have to take my eye off that animal and turn to look at what the person is saying, the animal could be doing something I have been sitting there training it to do. And now all of a sudden the animal's like, I'm offering this to you. You're not responding the way, history.
Right. So the animal is performing the behavior and we don't catch it.
Right.
And we don't catch it, so it doesn't get reinforced. That's.
And depending on the animal you're working with, you could be putting yourself in a dangerous situation.
Yeah, exactly.
Something else I wanted to talk about that you had mentioned, Steve. We were talking about using negative reinforcement. I just wanted to give one more example of that.
Sure.
There's a giraffe that I've been training puzzles, and I'm teaching him to back up on cue. Mm-hmm. And so those of you that are in I think level 2 memberships, I show this. So I'm training him to back up on cue. Why? Because I'm trying to figure out if the keepers ever get themselves in a situation where proximity is a concern, they can tell the giraffe to back up on cue. And actually where I was going with that was I was going to have him target his butt cheeks to a corner.
Yeah.
That way, you've got this gargantuous animal standing in front of you. If the animal's moving towards you, instead of, we know it's a lot, the animal understands quicker if you reinforce them for telling them what to do versus just consistently telling them what not to do without giving them any more information.
That's a big point of behavior modification. With every trainer, every instructor I've ever listened to or went to, tell the animal what to do, right? What not to do doesn't do anything it doesn't give them any information whatsoever, other than that was wrong. And that was wrong is not enough. We got to know what's right and reinforce that. And you mentioned targeting the rump to a spot. Targets is I won't say targeting is always the first thing to train, but it should be right up there in the top, because once you have a good target train, then you can do just about anything else.
That's how I train this giraffe to beginning recall. I trained him to touch his nose to the tennis ball at the end of the stick. And then what started happening is every time everybody thinks the stick is the magic wand, and it's not. It's just a contingency.
Yeah.
So then what I started doing after the giraffe knew in close, when he was standing right in front of me, when he sees the green tennis ball at the end of the stick, if I touch my nose to it, the carrots come.
Mm-hmm.
So what I started doing was when he was at the other end of his pen, I would...
Uh-oh, I'm freezing.
I am?
Well, it was just an audio freeze, so your video was normal, but there was an audio glitch. Okay, we're okay now, though.
Okay, cool. What I was saying is then I started taking the target stick out and showing puzzles from a long distance. He already knew what that green ball brought, so now it was the initial how I started training recall.
Marker. No. Well, explain what you mean by marker, Becky.
While we wait for Becky to respond, that example I wanted to give with puzzles with negative reinforcement, I taught him to back up on cue. And somebody else came in while I was training him and said, oh, I get that on cue pretty quick. And I said, you do? How do you do that? She's like, all you have to do is go up, and she put her hand on his chest and started pushing him. And
so there you go, negative reinforcement.
Yeah, so that's negative reinforcement. So I had like a couple weeks break from training at that zoo. I went back and started training again. And as you know, Steve, behavior doesn't lie. I walked up and I turned on the camera to show that I could back and puzzles would back up. And then I wanted to show, I hated doing it, but I wanted to see. So I put my hand on his chest with another method that was used, and I started back, and you know what I got? I got a big head of a giraffe coming down behind me, grabbed and bit my shirt and pushed me to the side.
Oh, yeah, and that's dangerous, right?
That is dangerous. Yep. So, and I was just like, it doesn't need to be.
Right.
It doesn't even need to be in the equation.
And there's a good chance that if the person who used that method did it, they might not have got the same response. That's another issue with training animals is I can take your animal to my house and train it or wherever and go and train this animal. But if you try to do the exact same thing, you might not get the same response. And, a lot of people, especially with dog training, are like, they send their dog off to a trainer, and yes, the dog's trained and the dog learns obedience or whatever the outcome you're desiring is. It doesn't mean it's going to respond the same to you when you try to do the same thing, because it's not a generalized behavior. And you may know what you're doing, Steve, when I bring my dog to you, and you can train all this, but you need to train me. Right. And
I'm going to take the dog home, and why is the sit stop happening after a week?
Right. A big thing with in clinic, I would notice with owners and parrots, and some species are more apt to do this than others. The owner would do something with the bird, and the bird would nip or bite, and I would hear, well, why did it did that? It just did it out of the blue, and I'm like, well, I was watching, and the bird gave you 4 signs that he didn't want you to do that. And once you learn those signs, it becomes a lot easier. And if the bird's on a stand or on a perch, and you move your hand toward it, and the bird even looks another direction, to me, that's a sign. The bird is looking for an escape.
Yeah.
And if the foot opposite you moves in a different direction, that to me, that's a sign. And
or even just a slight.
Even a move. And and I was like, well, the bird gave you 4 signs that it was going to bite you if you kept going. It not necessarily bite you, but at least try a different method of escaping the hand or the perch or whatever it is you're moving towards the bird. And human training to communicate with animals. Yes, I agree.
what I was going to say. But yeah, here's what I was going to say. Like B.F. Skinner said, the main form of behavior control today is coercion. It's, it's how I was raised.
How I was raised.
Yeah. So
spare the rod.
That has a long history of reinforcement for people. And another thing I hear is, well, it's got to do what I want to do if it wants to live here. Well, then train it. Show it.
You got to be the boss, right? You got to be the boss.
Yeah, you got to dominate. What did you say the other day, that animal is dominating you?
Yeah. If you let that go on, that bird will dominate your life. Yeah, you're right. I mean, we live in a punishment society. Do this or else, The consequences of this are bad if you do this. And it starts from birth.
Yeah.
Everything is bad.
Yeah. And unfortunately, it's like I was telling my husband, I don't think I would ever be able to work for another person again after owning the Animal Behavior Center.
Yeah.
Where I try my hardest to, I know when people walk in here, they say, this is such a stress-free environment. I'm like, not all the time.
It might be right now.
But they're like, it's so relaxing, and the animals seem so to enjoy what they're doing. But that's because we're always trying to include choice into whatever they're doing. I still need control over them.
Yeah.
For the safety of the people, the animals, whatever. But it's how am I going to implement that?
Right. Choice is a big one. A lot of people don't realize that choice is a major reinforcer. The option to make the outcome what you desired is a big reinforcer. And it's a big philosophical question about choice is, do we have choice of anything we do, or is it every decision we make based on what happened the last time we made that decision? So is there even free will? Because what we do is based on past consequences.
Yeah.
Nicole asks, do you believe each dog learns in a different manner? You want to take that one first?
Sure. I just want to make sure we get, I know we need, Becky asked you something about a marker, and I want to get back to Barbara as well.
Signal given at the moment of the desired behavior. Yes, that would be a marker, like a click would be a marker. I don't generally use clickers myself. Very often I use a verbal marker or even a motion. Marker is I guess you would call that a bridge. A bridge is another term for marker, and it is, yes, depending on which trainer you talk to. They use markers for a keep going signal. They use markers for the behavior is done signal. Each trainer is going to have a different use of the marker, but yes, a marker is, this is the behavior I was looking for.
Yeah, and I call it the
yes, I use good as well.
No, I was just going to add in on, I use the word bridge instead of marker, but that's the immediacy, because sometimes you can't get to that behavior fast enough. By the time you go to reinforce the behavior you wanted to see, the animal's already doing something else.
Yeah, there was a study done with pigeons and discs, poking the discs, and the study was how soon do you mark it to get an increase in behavior, and I believe at 10 seconds they never got the behavior on cue, and when it was under 2 seconds it took minutes to get the behavior on cue. Bridging or marker timing is everything for that.
Yeah. A lot of times, and with this example, I'll show a video and of getting an animal to go through a confined space, like a hoop, to walk through a hoop, a fly through hoop, whatever. So here's the hoop, let's see, and the time at which you want to deliver that bridge. Here comes the bird.
Yeah.
And that bridge comes in, boom, right there
Yeah.
when the bird goes through.
Yeah.
So otherwise, and a lot of times, if you don't deliver the bridge, sometimes the importance is in within 1 second, 2 seconds.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can.
Yeah, there's plenty of studies about timing, and in 1 to 2 seconds is best.
Yeah. And don't you think this, Steve? Superstitious behaviors are often developed out of improper timing of bridges.
Yeah, I could say that. Superstitious behavior, bootleg reinforcements, reinforcers that we don't see. That was what was it? Not really bootleg reinforcements, but the story of Clever Hans, the horse that could count. Yeah. And everybody thought this was the smartest horse in the world, and he was just going off the cues of the audience. Yeah. And he was, how the audience react to the number that came up, and that's how he would respond. A lot of the times the cues or the reinforcers are not what we think they are, and that can be a detriment to your training, or at least set you back for a little bit.
Sure, exactly. Yeah, and it can be frustrating. It's a clear line of communication.
Another one of the workshops I did, the guy was working with a falcon or a hawk of some sort, and the behavior was to get the bird up onto a ring perch, and the bird was always ahead of him. It would get there first, and he went back and looked at his video, and I might be remembering this a little differently, but when the bird saw his hand move towards the pouch that held the food, that's when the bird would behave. Yeah. Not when he said anything, not when he motioned. Not when any distinctive motion that he thought he was doing wasn't the cue at all. The cue was him moving his hand towards the pouch. And for him, that's what it was. Yeah. Let's see, what was the other question?
You care if I answer this one from Barbara real quick, because it's like far back.
I don't see it.
So, do you see it when I post it up here?
I do. I see it on my phone now, not on my tablet. So,
okay. So
what would have been the right way to get cello off your head?
Yeah. You want me to tell you, or Steve? Do you want to give a suggestion?
For me, I would probably have a station, and I would cue the station.
Cool.
So, that's how, like, one of my Goffins has a tendency to, if I'm cleaning the inside of the cage, might come down and I'm invading her territory, but I need to get it done. So she will come down and try to get my arm, and she doesn't do it anymore. But my arm might have been your head, being on your head. And what I did is I trained a station for her. If I'm going to clean the inside of her cage now, I go up, and she climbs to the top of her door that's open and waits. And, for me, to get an animal to not be on my head, on my arm, on my, wherever I don't want them, I train a different station. I'm sure there's other ways to do it, but that's what I would do.
Sure. No, I think that's great. I think it's brilliant. And I might give that some thought, because cello flies to my head because that is on an intermittent schedule of reinforcement. Uh-huh. Like when I'm giving a presentation here and I need my hands free, I'll reinforce him being on my head.
Yes.
I'll reinforce him being on my shoulder so I can keep my hands free. So mm-hmm. this is one of the first places I targeted him to.
Yeah.
That was 2 years ago during a big function we had here. And so there's a history there mm-hmm. now. What I ended up doing, and that stays strong because I keep thinking, I'm like, okay, now I do want him there. Okay, now I don't want him there. Now I do want him there. So the first time I dumped him, I knew what I was doing. I was like, I better think. Yeah. I'm like, I better give this some thought.
Do as I say, not as I do.
I am preparing cello to go fly in a gymnasium at a function.
Oh, cool.
If I keep doing this. This is not going to be good for when I'm in front of all these people, when I'm like, well, fly to my head or come or whatever I want. So what I started doing was I'm like, and I was trying to tell him to go different places and he wasn't. And I'm like, why isn't he? Probably because of schedule reinforcement.
Exactly. Intermittent's a really big reinforcer too.
What is?
Intermittent reinforcements is very
strong.
And if you don't believe that, go to any casino.
Yes, exactly. If you don't believe that, that's why you don't do things like reinforce yourself with eating a box of macaroni and cheese after you. So what I started doing, Barbara, is I put my hand up like this. But if I put my hand up like this, he'd boom and he'd peck it, and not in a nice way. So what I started doing is like, I do want him to step up onto my hand on cue when I ask him to. So I started out off with luring. I would show him the pine nut, and then so now when I put my hand up there, he hops to the hand. He knows he gets reinforcers, and then I just tell him where I want him to go.
Yeah.
So, Steve, was there not another question directed towards you?
I don't know if it was directed towards me. It was something about. Let me see here if I can scroll back. Do you believe each dog learns in a different manner?
Okay.
I try to approach every animal as an individual learner, because it is an individual learner. And to say, do dogs learn in different manners? You would say, I would say that there is a bell curve of learning methods, or even in any species, there's a bell curve. So if you have the big bell curve, you'll find many species will be in the middle and will be able to learn that way, maybe more effectively than any other. And as you go to each end of the bell curve, there's different methods of learning. That might not be the best example, but no two animals are going to learn this exact same. And learning how that particular animal or organism learns is going to help immensely. Teaching kids with video that learn better reading doesn't work, and I think a lot of training, learning, even with any organism, is learning how that animal learns best. Yeah.
And I just heard an example of given this the other day, and I was like, that was beautifully brilliant. It was beautiful and brilliant. So, like you said, Steve, each animal should be taken on as its own individual because there's a history of reinforcement. There's a history there. Mm-hmm. There's, environmental history there. So this is the example I was listening to the other day. You wouldn't take two kids named Sarah and assume they're the same.
Right, right.
When I said that, I was just like, beautiful. When you categorize like that, I often say you can get yourself in trouble. You can get yourself in danger because a lot of the animals I work with, and Steve, when you're working with prey, when you're working with exotics, I'm sure when you're working with any animal, you can get yourself in some really dangerous situations. So that animal needs to be treated and approached as an individual, and its reinforcers are going to be, some may be similar, but some could be completely different than the last dog that you trained.
Yeah.
Or the last parrot.
Yeah, not only do animals or each dog learn differently. There's similarity between any species archetype, I would think, but learning, how the best to say this? You have to have the right reinforcer, and the learner determines the reinforcer. We don't do that, and so. Their dog. So if you train a dog primarily with food and the dog's full, what are you going to do? Uh, the dog is satiated, so working for food's not going to work. Whereas if you have the time, have the relationship with the animal, and a scratch behind the ear is a reinforcer, then you can use that. Is that the same as a different way of learning? Maybe not, but it's a different way of training, I would say.
Well, that kind of brings us into it's after 10.
Oh, is it?
But you want to take one more, we'll address one more question, Steve?
The learner picks the reinforcement, absolutely, Tim.
Well, here's where you were already commenting on this, so let's pull up Wanda's. That she has a blue and gold that is not nice, and I see a lot of videos and such offering food as a reinforcer. Well, she is not food driven at all. How would you handle that?
Oh, yeah, I won't say that's a super tough one, but yeah, that's pretty tough. Identifying the reinforcer for the individual is trying sometimes. It's very hard in some cases. If I look like I'm being
You're being
crazy here, it's because I have hummingbirds everywhere on my head right now, and they're not happy because I'm near their food. The reinforcer has to be determined, and how we determine it is looking at the behavior the animal does. So if you see a behavior that is repeated, what happens after that behavior is done? So what's in it for the bird? What did he get out of the behavior? And sometimes that's difficult. I was working with the Timna at one point, and I had worked with this bird before, and it got adopted out. And I went to the house, and I said, find the bird's favorite treats, and just don't give him his normal food and other treats, but don't give him his favorite treats the day before. And that's a fairly common tactic. And I got there, and the bird had absolutely no interest at all in any treats. I tried. The lady has probably a half a dozen types of treats that the bird gets, at different schedules, and it had no interest in any of them. All the bird wanted to do was be on my shoulder. And when your reinforcement for a behavior is to pick the bird up and put it on your shoulder and then take it off, it really slows down what you're trying to do, because that takes a lot of time. And I said, well, the learner is not ready. He's not ready to do anything for me, because this is not the contingency and congruency is not such that I can train, because timing is way off. So I said, we're done. Sometimes it's not time to train because the animal is not ready. So for a blue and gold, who is, let's see here, not nice. What does not nice mean?
I knew you were going to say that. Let's assume, for the sake of time, that it's nipping or biting.
If it's nipping or biting, and we don't have a reinforcer, so what does the bird like to do? Let's take food out of the equation altogether. Is there a favorite toy? Is there a favorite location? Is there it's not nice, you're not going to be scratching his head. So let's put that out of the question. We got to find out what is nice for the bird. What does the bird want? Cage aggressive vary. I have a Catalina macaw that Lara saw yesterday, who was on my shoulder, very content. Rainbow, yes. My birds aren't even up yet. They should be up pretty soon. Is Jason here? Hey, Jason. So a cage aggressive bird, I would try and find out what the bird wants. So the Rainbow here, when she was released to the clinic, she was a surrendered bird. The very first day, I thought I was going to, this is before I was further along the behavior train here. I was going to be the big guy, and I opened the door and wanted to step her up. And she got me first day. That was the last time she got me.
One
So
positive punisher.
yes. The only other time she's got me in the 3.5 years I've had her was when I had her on my arm in the clinic, and the associate vet walked right up to us, and she hates the associate vet. And I can say she hates the associate vet by the behavior she performs when the vet is near. She got me instead of the vet, and that was the only other time. So what I did is, from that time on, the cage was never opened while I was near, and I identified her favorite reinforcer, which was almonds at the time, still is. And every time I would come by, I would drop one in a bowl that I said, put the bowl in there. There's nothing else in the bowl, and or there was food in the bowl, and I would drop a treat in, and then I would walk off. And she responded, and luckily it was really easy. And after she was comfortable picking up the almond, sorry, the hummingbirds are distracting me. So, she picked up the almond, and eventually I would hold an almond at the very tip of her reach through the bars. It's important to know how far a bird can reach through the bars because I learned that a long time ago, that they reach a lot further than we think they can sometimes. So I would hold the almond out through the bars to where her beak could touch it, and then I would just slide it to where she could get it with her tongue. And I just watched her body language. And as soon as I saw she was comfortable, I opened the door. And I still wouldn't step her up. I would open the door and work from the furthest of her reach on the perch, where she still couldn't get me if she wanted to. And it just takes time. And you watch the language. What's the bird telling you?
Yeah.
But first, I mean, if it's not food motivated, then maybe it's the wrong food. Maybe it's the wrong presentation of the food.
Temperature can make a difference as well.
Temperature of the food. A spoon with baby food might work. Warmed baby food, I've seen people use that. Whatever food reinforcer you use, though, make sure that the bird has the activity level to sustain that much food. I've seen a lot of well-trained birds in clinic. By well-trained, I mean 20%, 30% overweight.
Oh, gotcha. And that's another reason why I say build your animal's list of reinforcers. Try to build it if possible. That's tough. Because like you said earlier, Steve, you train that dog, that bird, I can't remember what we were talking about, but then somebody else tries to train it. If they don't know what they're trying to train or how to approach it, I feel like I'm being very unclear with what I'm trying to say. But
I'm following.
But build that animal's list of reinforcers, because if you move that animal to a new location, you may have to train that behavior. You may have to reshape that behavior. And,
right, yeah. Your toolbox might be smaller.
Yeah. And say I'm sitting here training an animal to do something, and then Steve walks in the door, my reinforcers for using to getting that behavior from that animal may change because of that environmental event that just walked in. So, right.
And that's a big thing about generalizing the behavior. At World Bird Sanctuary, where I volunteer occasionally, when you're training birds for flight, for shows, you start in one room, then you move to another room, then you move to another room, then you move outside, then you have people outside with it. The generalized behavior to perform the behavior in other circumstances is as big as the changing the reinforcers, I believe. Because a bird's not, or any animal's not going to perform in one place the same as in another because of the environmental distractions.
Yeah, and those are key factors that must be paid attention to. Well, Steve, we're going on 10:15.
A lot longer than I thought.
Yeah, these fly by, don't they?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if anybody wanted to get a hold of you, Steve, how would they get a hold of you?
I let's see here.
Are you typing?
Let's see. I typed hello. I don't.
Here, want me to try it?
Sure.
Tell me what do you want me to type on here?
I was gonna type from my other Facebook account, but I can't do that for some reason. If you contact me through my Facebook here, that would be fine. Let's see.
You want to give me thanks, Janet. You want to give me an email address and I'll type it in?
Sure. Stephen with a PH.
Okay.
Johnson at gmail.com. I have my Bluetooth keyboard set to my phone, but my phone's not typing in the feed here.
So Stephen.r.johnson@gmail.com.
That's correct. I have an email set up with my LLC, but I don't remember it off the top of my head because I don't use it a whole lot.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks so much, Steve, for
Oh, you're welcome.
And also, when we're done with this live stream, feel free to go in. This is what I do, Steve.
Answer questions.
Go in and answer questions so people know exactly who you are and how to contact you.
Yeah, I know we're kind of free form, so we're all over the place today, but I hope there was some good information there.
I think there's a lot of good information there. And actually, I'd love to have you back on maybe in the future, and let's do it again.
Sure.
Okay?
Sure, absolutely.
And maybe
No
we
problem
pick
at
a
all.
topic and then just dissect it, all that.
Yeah, maybe we'll take a question, specific behavior training and work it out or something.
Yeah, I think that'd be fun. Okay.
My tablet's dying on me.
All right.
Yeah, maybe next time I'll actually be in a room and not all these distractions. So I'm a crazy man.
Actually, the background was nice, a lot better than mine.
I have a pond behind me. The water soothes me. The fountains. Luckily it rained here this morning, and I'm under an umbrella. It hasn't really rained on me yet, but I get the condensation from the trees falling on me, which is
nice. You got a pretty good background. So
I thought it was better than a wall. So.
All right. Well, Steve, thanks so much, and I look forward to having you back on here again.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, Laura. I appreciate you having me on.
You're welcome. Take care.
Uh-huh.